good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love. All love. I got something here for you and me. Oh yeah, it's a medical marijuana. Whoa, whoa. I got something here for you and me. Oh yeah, it's a medical marijuana. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. Today we have a really cool guest. It's Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. Do you remember a couple of years ago when Kosher Kush was the thing? And it was a great strain, but was it really kosher? We're going to talk to Rabbi Cohen. He's going to tell us all about why kosher cannabis is needed, and we're going to talk about what's in the Bible as well. So without any further wait, here is our interview. We'll be right back with it.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love. All love.
And we're back. And today I have Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. Rabbi Cohen is on a mission to make sure cannabis products are available for anyone who keeps kosher and for the rest of us as well. In a community where kosher certification is important and where some people aren't comfortable with smoking, certifying edibles is crucial to ensuring access. Welcome to Medical Marijuana Radio, Yakov. Rabbi.
Great to be here. Pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, so I saw some stories about you, and it got me curious about kosher. And of course, we had a strain from Los Angeles a few years ago called Kosher Kush, but unless you made it kosher, it probably wasn't. So tell us about what something that is kosher means to the Jewish tradition and so forth.
Okay, so first of all, kosher does not mean blessed by the rabbi, okay? It's a misconception even amongst many Jewish people. But what it is basically is a very set of detailed laws as laid down in the 5 books of Moses, covering a whole spectrum of foods, everything from meat, dairy, fish, fowl, bugs, and wine. And basically each one of those sets has different criteria that meets kosher standard. Kosher literally just means fit, meaning fit to ingest. So classically, most people would think, okay, everybody knows usually the pig is not kosher, right?
Right.
So it's only not kosher as far as eating. If I could drape myself from head to toe in pig skin, that's perfectly fine. Okay, it's only just what we ingest.
Okay.
So basically, all of these, it covers a lot of very detailed laws, like what kind of animal is kosher, how it's slaughtered. We can't mix milk and meat, right? Fish, as opposed, it has to have fins and scales. You can't have lobster, crabs,
Sure.
or any derivatives of any of those things. Even if you had a kosher animal, let's say a cow, and it wasn't slaughtered kosher, and you have a derivative, such as the classic derivative, which is gelatin, that is kosher because it comes from a cow that was not slaughtered according to Jewish ritual. So then it goes on to bugs or derivatives of bugs. Let's say, for example, used to be the red dye of M&Ms, your favorite candy, was made out of the blood of a beetle called the Conchinta beetle, I think. Okay. So until they figured out to make a synthetic dye. So M&Ms were off the table. Couldn't kosher.
But the other colors could be?
Yeah. Other colors usually didn't come from an animal or bug source.
Okay. And as far as pork is concerned, it can never be kosher, right? Because it's just, is that because of the way back in the day, pork couldn't be kept in a safe manner just because of...
I was told that also. I was raised Reform. I was also told, it used to be the way it was, and now it's okay. The Torah is eternal. The Bible is eternal. And God, who is our doctor, says, don't lay off of this, it didn't mean, given certain circumstances. It was throughout the board. And actually, in the end of days, we know in the Messianic days, the pig will be kosher. Would you believe it? Okay. So you could look forward to a day where the pig will be kosher.
Well, I don't know that we'll be
I'm not.
that, but so let's talk about the Bible for a second. Are there other misconceptions? Was the burning bush cannabis? I mean, is cannabis anointing oil? Is that
Okay, there you go. So burning bush, I highly doubt was a cannabis plant. Okay, no such recorded detail or commentary at all handed down. Okay, but however, the anointing oil, though, one of the spices of the anointing oil was called canebosum, and canebosum, if you put them together, it sounds like cannabis, right? And it does mean canebosum is fragrant sticks, fragrant reed. So therefore, and Rabbi Kaplan does bring that down in his commentary, that one of the suggestions is that it is cannabis indeed. And they did discover on the altars many, many years ago, in the biblical times, the times of the temple, 2,000 years ago, that there was a certain period of time where the Jewish people had their own kind of like backyard altars where they would burn things on, burn sacrifices, and they discovered they didn't have the right instrumentation to figure out what was being burnt on them until just recently. Maybe you saw that article where they actually were able to then decipher what was burned on them, and they discovered there was lots of cannabis that was burned on these backyard altars. So it does go back as far as that goes. I don't know as far as smoking, though, but definitely for an anointing oil mixed with the other oils, who knows what the chemical compounds would give.
Was anointing oil just used to put topically on people when they were
Only for the king, the high priests, there are a few high priests, and all of the vessels that were in the temple. Nobody else was allowed to do that. And it's supposed to have some really unbelievable, unique properties to it. Once you're anointed, it just gave you a special stature. So, but then again, like I say, there's herbs that are used for remedies, right? And you might have pondered this question before. Why do herbs have cornered the market for healing properties? Why not other things, right? You can have fruits, you can have other substances, and there are other substances that do have healing properties, minerals, and some foods. But herbs basically cornered the market. You ever wonder why, right, in the world? So it actually comes about the third day of creation. In the third day of creation, when God created the trees and the grasses, he's told the trees, now trees, you guys are going to bear fruit. I don't want any of y'all to go mixing. That means the avocado does not dance with the mango. There is no mango with the mango, ever. So the trees got this directive that they're not allowed to mix. And he didn't say it to the grasses. God did not tell the grasses anything. So the grasses are like, well, what are we going to do? Say they had a board meeting, right? At a huge meeting, all these grasses got together to discuss, should we mix or not mix? And they came up with this logical argument with the trees. They use this kind of logical deduction. If the trees, which normally don't mix, and they're told not to mix, because really they don't, really they kind of stand alone. So us, who our nature is to mix, we all the more so we will not mix. That's what they said. So therefore, the grasses are going to stay separate. Now, God heard that, and he says, you guys thought about that all by yourselves. Because of that, I am bestowing upon you healing, the power to heal. So if you want to know in general that why, let's say in the Bible, where do herbs get the power to heal? That is where it comes from. They were the first, let's say, creation to make such a decision. on an energy level, their vibrational level, and therefore God bestowed them with the power to heal. So here is this one herb that we're speaking specifically about, which I do have another phrase that I kind of use in this area, that we have a verse from Psalms. King David says, the stone that was cast away by the builders becomes the cornerstone. Maybe you've heard that phrase before.
Yes.
It's used a lot of times. Basically, something that's a misfit, you shouldn't really throw it away, because you never know in the end that it's karma is going to go ahead and bring it back into your face, and you're going to need it, right? Basically. So here's an herb that we looked at that really got a serious bad rap. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh,
right? And
right.
right, they really just totally obliterated this in the entire world. And yet now it's coming out that it has healing properties, tremendous healing properties. So I say, in place of the stone that was cast away by the builders becomes the cornerstone, I say the herb that was cast away by the doctors now becomes the corner herb, right? Yeah. So now it's a very prime herb that is now coming out now, even though maybe in biblical times it was used, but I think it has a special place now in this. We see it now, how many people are getting tremendous benefit from this medicinally. I know scores and scores of people who got benefit from this. And you might want to ask the question, how did I get started on this?
Yes. Let me ask you, how did you get started on this, Rabbi?
So I was always doing kosher certification. I was giving kosher certification for the past 25 years. I would give to coffee. I was giving to salt. I was giving to strawberries, any kind of food item in general. And then 7.5 years ago, my 5-year-old kid was diagnosed with brain cancer. And of course, we were just totally in shock. And we did go through the mainstream protocol, surgery and chemotherapy, radiation. And then it came back after a year. And the doctors basically said, well, we can do more chemo, maybe, more chemo and maybe, is that what you're saying? And therefore my wife just went on the internet and was looking up, and she knew about the studies that went on in Israel in terms of advancement of this medicine, that how it could actually cure cancer. And we got some stories also in the West Coast about kids who got cured of cancer through cannabis. So we flew out to California, got a prescription for him. At the time, you needed a prescription. And the doctor prescribed, you got to give raw bud, you got to give oil, you got to do everything. And he was doing great on it. And we couldn't stay in California, flew back to Texas. The people there who we met, these righteous women, so helpful, God bless them, agreed to send it to us. But of course, the feds caught it at the post office, and my son, Alicia, did not get the medicine anymore. And then he declined. We went to another place for an experimental medicine. And basically what happened was he fell into a coma and passed away.
I'm sorry.
But during that whole process, and we're still processing that because it's something that parents don't overcome, just to be involved in such a thing. But part of it was people would come to us with their sick ailments, sicknesses, cancer mostly. And I was saying, try cannabis. I was trying to work my son up to a therapeutic dose. I couldn't get there because he was a kid. And the oils they're very potent, as you know, the RSO oils.
Yes.
So trying to work him up to a therapeutic dose as he fell into a coma before. Even during the coma, I think I was working still to give him. Mm-hmm. We never gave up hope. And so people were coming to me and I would say, try it. And I was trying to get them hooked up. So then finally, it came out in California. Some people had a hard time smoking. Some people had a hard time with vape. So like I say, let's try to get edibles kosher. And then I went to some places. First it was CBD. And then I even went to some places that were making some edibles to ask them if they wanted to go kosher. And they went, yes. The first place was Canna Kids, that was producing actually oil for kids, who had cancer, and they wanted to get kosher. And then, of course, one thing led to another, and And the more that I helped people, at least having access to it, that's the mission here. People who need it medicinally, and kosher means basically, it's another pair of eyes that looked at it. It's not, even non-Jewish people eat kosher. They're interested in a safe, healthy product. Vegans, vegetarians, Muslims. It's not just religious Jews. If they see a kosher symbol on it, they feel good because another pair of eyes looked at it.
Yes, it's a confidence builder to see that.
Yes. So, and a certain way to remove the stigma, because some people are so stigmatized to this day that they don't want to have anything to do with it, right? So I'm trying to chew. We're all on our fronts, right? You're on your front, right? Reaching all of these people, and I'm on my front trying to just chisel away at the stigma and going, hey, you got to try this. And then the more people I was leading, I was helping to get this medicine for them, I saw tremendous benefits from people with all kinds of ailments all across the board. You've got rheumatoid arthritis, somebody who had migraines who would take it, they would go to sleep, they wake up the next morning, they're fine.
That's been
Right?
the problem. Let me just interrupt a second. Part of the problem to try to get rid of the stigma is the fact that it is so good for so many different ailments and symptoms and so forth. And people, yeah, right. It's good for, shrinking tumors too, right? Yeah. I mean, that's been the hard work that in educating people about cannabis is that it really is good for ALS and MS and the list of things. And the future is going to show us that people were right all along, and that the government's patent 6630507 from the 70s that said all of this, yet it had no medicinal value, and it was a Schedule One drug. That's what we're all fighting for, and the health of people that, unfortunately, because of prohibition, have not been able to use this great plant, this herb that you talk about. So carry on, please.
Right. So part of the mission, the mission is basically to have this medicine available for people, that people who need it medicinally should have kosher options, and it should be easily accessible. Not if, even if you, let's say, places where you'll need a prescription, it's not easy, right? As opposed to if you go to a place where you don't need a prescription, i.e. the world calls it recreational, but anybody could walk in and buy something, right? And have some relief of whatever it is. Who knows? People are traveling all over the place. They get stuck, they need it, and it helps. It helps a lot of people. So, like I said, I know a guy who would be out of commission for 4 or 5 days. He'd get a migraine, and he's out of commission, right? And none of the conventional medicines would help this guy. Until finally, he would take a gummy, go to sleep, and he wakes up the next day, and he's fine, which is that's remarkable. Okay, what do you say to that? And on the other side of the coin, there are people who we know who are in our community. They had a child who was suffering from multiple seizures a day, baby. And my wife is holding him, and the kid is having these seizures, and she's going, you got to try cannabis. You got to try it. CBD, even, we do Charlotte's Web. We suggest that to all these people. But because it's cannabis, they said, no. And they didn't do it. They didn't take it. They didn't give it to their kid. The kid suffered brain damage, and the parents, the family broke up and got a divorce as a result of this. It was too much for them to handle. What do you say to that? Okay. So, like I say, my part of the battle is helping to remove the stigma, right? Putting a kosher symbol on it. And therefore, it's just another thing to get past, right? Just another obstacle that could possibly be removed.
So, am I wrong in understanding what you said earlier in that maybe only foods can become kosher as far as cannabis foods are concerned? Can smoke become kosher?
Great question. Okay, so let's say the plant itself, right? Plants, usually all vegetables, are inherently kosher. They don't have an issue. Okay. They do have an issue as far as bugs go, let's say, like your real leafy lettuce or strawberries even contain bugs, blackberries, raspberries. These things contain very small bugs in them.
And
Which
cannabis.
is, what?
And cannabis.
Cannabis, I went to a farm in Mendocino to visit some place that they wanted to have their flower tops kosher. I'll do it. And I went there and examined them and found thrips on them, these very, very small bugs on them. You know, there was an outdoor grow, not an indoor grow. I haven't tested indoor grow. I think I have tested indoor grow. It's much less. But still, nevertheless, bugs do get in it. But I asked a rabbi. I don't sometimes rely on myself. We have a whole network of rabbis who we take advice from. And he says, well, the most use for the plants, the flower tops, is smoking. So when you burn it and you're burning, let's say if there's a bug in it, you're burning the bug and there's no problem of you inhaling a burnt bug. Okay, if there's a bug. Okay, so that's just as far as the flower tops go. So basically, there's no real issue with having flower tops kosher. We do actually do in Oregon. They want it. They want their flower tops to be kosher, so we do it. Meraki Gardens out of Oregon, out of Portland. So we will do it. We do offer it, and I do also Curaleaf also on the East Coast for their flower tops. So because they want it's just one thing that just it helps that another pair of eyes looked at it. It hasn't been rubbed with any pig oil or any foreign substances. Let's go to the next level. Next level is when you want to break it down to an oil, right? So you need a solvent for that. What kind of solvent do you use?
Right.
I
was saying you need some kind of a solvent, whether alcohol is one.
Classically, it was butane in the RSO early days, right? Which is basically a petroleum base. That's not an issue if it's petroleum based mined and things like that. The biggest issue with the solvents that most places use is ethanol.
That is.
Now, ethanol has an issue because some ethanol is made from grape or whey. Now, grape is a problem as far as kosher goes because we have an edict from the rabbis from thousands of years ago that once a grape is squished, we don't know what the people had in mind, because what had happened is, in Jewish rituals, we make what's called kiddush. We sanctify the day on a cup of wine. We use wine in a lot of our daily rituals, not daily, weekly rituals for holidays and the Sabbath. And because that wine is so used in rituals and all wine looks the same, we're afraid of a pagan wine, okay? This is from thousands of years ago. They were worried about pagan wine getting switched with kosher wine, and nobody wants to bless with using pagan wine. So the rabbis made a decree, hey, we got to make sure wine is kosher from the time that grape is squeezed until it is bottled with a double seal. It's got to be watched by an Orthodox Jew, and no one else should touch it, because if someone touches it, it's no good. So grapes has a very high level of sensitivity because of our ritual patterns. So therefore, if ethanol comes from grape, it presents an issue. Whey, some cheeses is made from whey. Cheese is also an issue as far as kosher laws go, because cheese is basically, to make cheeses, you throw an enzyme into the milk to make it curdle. So the enzyme comes from the stomach lining of a cow, classically called rennet. So that stomach lining of a cow, if the cow was not slaughtered kosher, you took the rennet out and you put it in the milk to make cheese, the whole cheese is not kosher because it came from a non-kosher rennet source. So ethanols are an issue as far as it could be from grape or whey. So therefore, we have to verify ethanols to make sure it comes from corn or wheat or sugar, or anything else that comes from a kosher source.
Wow, I love learning that today. Thank you so much, because I've been using Everclear ethanol, to make extractions at home for many, many years, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure what the that
I'm
particular.
pretty sure Everclear is kosher. It's from wheat, but I have to double check on
Right.
that.
Well,
So,
that's good to know. That's what most people do use. However, big extraction companies, buy, I believe, grape ethanol.
they've tried it. I've been in one place where they tried it. It didn't really make first of all, it's more expensive, and it didn't really make a great difference as far as, let's say, using a wheat ethanol. It could be that the places that I know of, none of them, they all use kosher ethanol. So there's no issue there.
Great. So
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so edibles, all right. What could be in an edible? I mean, I'm sure you've checked out.
Okay. So I'm moving in steps here.
Okay, good.
Flour and then oil. So oil basically is ethanol. If in most places, even though they'll use a CO2 extraction, they'll still use an ethanol either to separate the lipids from the oil, or just, the raw part of the plant,
Right.
or just to help move it to make it where it's just more, workable because it's very thick. And so they'll still use ethanol, and even though they might distillate it, they'll distill it out for sure. We need to go ahead and verify how much is distilled out, how much is really still in there. But then again, let's say you got that. Now, the interesting thing is, and why I want to get to that before I get to the edibles, is the vape pens, right? You remember the vape pen scare about, what was that, 2 years ago?
Terrible.
A vape pen, it came out, it was mostly black market vape pens, correct or not correct?
Exactly.
I heard it was black market vape pens because they were cutting it with other things. So I go to a couple places where I give a hechsher to vape pens. Matter of fact, one place was in, where was it? Wisconsin, where, not Wisconsin, sorry, near Chicago and Ohio. And they actually they wanted it kosher. They called the name of the vape pen Oi Vape.
Very clever.
Okay. In any case, though, we have to go and check and make sure that this oil we know what goes in. We know what goes in the vape pen, right? So therefore, it makes kind of sense. If you're buying black market, you could run into problems because who knows what's in it, as opposed to when you're getting it kosher. But let's allow now to move on behind the vape pens. The next step is, of course, edibles. Okay. Now, edibles is like anything else. Okay, that we don't know what goes in to making that edible, whether it's a brownie, a gummy, or it's chocolate. Okay, like all of these items have their various kosher concerns. Gummies is the biggest because why? Most gummies is made from gelatin. Gelatin comes from cow bones, melted cow bones and pig bones. Okay, so therefore it's not kosher. Okay, as opposed to if you make it from pectin, pectin's fine. Pectin comes from a plant. Still, we have to go and we have to verify it. We have to go to the place, inspect the place, make sure that's what they're making it out of. It's pectin, that's fine. And I'm not making it out of gelatin. There is a kosher gelatin. It's only one I saw. That's a kosher gelatin that you can get. There's one place, the Dubitz brothers, that they're working on making out of kosher gelatin. Okay. But let's say what else goes into it. You make a cookie or a brownie. There's all kinds of things that go into besides sugars, flavorings, and oils, MCT oil, tinctures, just to go back to tinctures for a minute. An MCT oil classically is a coconut oil. But the issue is it's been processed. Now, even though it's a coconut oil, which should be inherently kosher, it's a vegetable, it's a fruit, right? The problem is it could be manufactured in a same facility that they do other oils, beef oil. So if they do on Sunday a beef oil, Monday a beef oil, and then Tuesday they want to do their MCT coconut oil, it's been contaminated because of the equipment. That's the second thing that goes into kosher. One is the raw materials, and two is the integrity of the equipment. Has the equipment been compromised with non-kosher materials? So even though it's a coconut oil, it still could have issues. It has to be kosher.
So how does one work that out? You talk to the manufacturer and say you've got to clean your machines if we're going to call this kosher, right?
Good question. So we get a call. They want their product kosher. So I have to get a list of all the things that they use. And if it's an MCT oil, we need to know the company and we need to know if it's kosher. And if it's not kosher, they have to switch it for a kosher company. And there are plenty. There are plenty of kosher MCT oils, places that I give a kosher certification for, like Charlotte's Web. They all use a kosher MCT oil, and all these other places. So it's readily available. It just has to be kosher, coming from a kosher source.
Right. You have to want to source it and use it.
Yeah. So and then let's say they didn't use a kosher oil from the beginning. They used a non-kosher MCT oil in their machinery. We come and we kosherize it. We make it kosher. Basically, we can purge the contaminants, the non-kosher contaminants in the machinery, and then you could use it, and then it's good to go, right? So we'll use hot water. Most of the time it's hot water and boiling water, and then that's it. It's considered to be kosher now.
How many of you are there, so to speak? I know there's only one Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, but
I believe there's only one other rabbi that is doing this.
within cannabis.
Yes.
Okay, but obviously there's
the other. No, I can't say that. That's not correct. Medicinal wise, they will all do it if it's a tincture. Okay. Anybody, if it's only medicinal and it's only a tincture, if you want to make it medicinal and in an edible like a chocolate or a gummy, they won't do it. There's only one other rabbi that will do it besides me.
Mm-hmm. And
I'm more daring, I have to say. I could get in trouble even for this right now, this powwow with you right now, okay? But because of my son, because I saw what he went through and I saw that it was helping him. And I believe that in this medicine, and I know and I see how it helps so many people. So therefore, I want to make it readily available for all people, that it should be easily accessible.
Israel has been way ahead of everybody. Dr. Raphael Meshulam, not Dr.
Yeah.
Sorry, Professor Raphael Meshulam, has been working on cannabis, since the late 50s, early 60s, and is responsible. I mean, in Israel, as you probably know, they have vaporizers in rooms for people to use. They're using cannabis in hospitals.
Yes.
There, it's
In hospitals, and people are able to get, I believe, only the flower in pharmacies, certain pharmacies. I don't think they have gotten to the level of vape pens outside of the hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Those are a little bit harder to get. They're still behind in terms of their laws and regulations, even though, let's say, medicinal wise, and you can get a prescription, it's still, they're a little bit behind as far as that's a vape pen or accessibility or edibles, let's go, for example.
I honestly don't know how great vape pens might be medicinally, because a lot of them are stripped out of the whole plant, okay, and with the solvents that we talk about. So I particularly never tasted a vape pen that had the effect that I was looking for in cannabis. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out in the future.
Well, something, if some people just need to go to sleep, they have a sleeping ailment, and they need to sleep. So I know people that it helps them to sleep. I know older people, it helps them just to get to sleep because they don't sleep good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it helps you, right? But as far as totally agree with you. You want to get the whole part of the plant. It took me a while till they finally got into my head that when they do use the solvents, they strip all of the other parts of the plant, like the terpenes, right?
And they're so important.
So important. You got to get the whole plant, right? You got to get the whole plant. So it makes sense what you're saying, totally.
Well,
but most of these places that use edibles, they also use the oils. That's how they do it.
right. So if they're using distillate, okay, which is the stripped out version of oil, or they're distilling the cannabis and it's basically clear oil, can that be kosher? Because it's
yes.
Can, okay, even if
Yes.
that whole plant, okay.
Yeah. So but of course you're going to use the distillate. You're going to use an alcohol, correct?
I'm not real sure technically if you always need to use alcohol with a distillate. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, I mean my experience with distillates is always used with an alcohol, or some people now crystallize it and they'll use a petroleum based product to get the crystals.
But again, as long as it's wheat, alcohol, and
But then you're right. You're stripping it of all the other elements. So then it's kind of like, there's an issue there.
yeah, and
It's an,
people add back in terpenes, by the way, some places that may not even be sourced from cannabis. They could be myrcene from mango.
absolutely, absolutely. I do a place that puts terpenes together, and they're not coming from the cannabis plant, right? Those
Right.
terpenes that reintroduce.
But a molecule is supposedly a molecule in science, and when it's isolated, so we have to think about that and see what it's like for the future. I know that at the beginning, when people started adding terpenes back in and from other plants and so forth, there was a very crucial amount to add back in before it made you cough and choke and so forth. So they've been working.
Interesting. Okay.
First vape pens that had terpenes added back in were unusable. And
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I,
Okay.
I've been using this plant for 53 years this June. Okay, summer of
You
1958.
gotta. What's the plant? Which plant? Are you talking about in general, or you have a special like strain?
No, just cannabis in general. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I call it the whole plant, nothing but the plant, so help me plant. That's,
So I believe that people are making ways in how to extract the whole plant part. I believe that people they put it in alcohol and freeze the alcohol, and I think that captures everything.
well, actually, I've done that many, many times. You actually freeze the bud, okay, in a,
Yeah.
and you freeze the alcohol, and then you wash you pour the alcohol into the jar, let's say of the frozen bud, and you shake it like a martini for a little bit for a few minutes, okay, and then you pour it,
Take it not stirred.
and then you pour it through a couple of coffee filters and just get this beautiful liquid, and then you evaporate off the alcohol and purge it using some heat and get all the bubbles and the alcohol out, and then you have your cannabis oil, your full extract cannabis oil that people call FICO instead of Rick Simpson oil, which he used naphtha originally, which was probably horrifying, but still helped many, many people.
Yeah. 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 We were using that with my son.
Mhm.
I was able to get some at the beginning stages, but once again, we didn't have a protocol back then. No one really had a good protocol, especially like for kids, like how much to start off with.
Well, that's the whole situation with cannabis in general is dosage. Okay, when I managed a dispensary for 2 years, and I also counseled new patients and so forth, and I had people in their 90s that I had to teach and tell them what to expect that they've never had cannabis before. So it's an educating uh, situation with everybody, because if you have and dosing is where this. If you have a bad experience the first time, you're not going to go back to this wonderful medicine, this wonderful plant.
Right. There you go.
So it's
There
really
you go. So I'm curious though, how do you coach these elderly people for the first time?
well.
What is
uh,
it?
Well, certainly, if it's smoking it or eating it, I mean, it's just like if you're smoking it, a first time person, I say take one puff and put it down, and you wait 15-20 minutes to see how you feel. And you should do that actually whenever you try a new cultivar, a new name strain, okay? Because it's all different. And the same Blue Dream could be grown by one grower and another grower, and it could be two totally different effects because the amount of THC and other cannabinoids are going to be different depending upon what they fed it and who's growing it. So it's about starting, obviously, with edibles. It's hugely important, and I would start somebody like on 1 milligram of an
Right.
okay, and see how that works. And then maybe if they don't feel anything, I wouldn't even give them any more that day. I would say the next day, try two. The problem that, as you know and read about, that people who take edibles for the first time, they don't feel anything after an hour, and they take another one, and and then eventually it kicks in. I mean, it takes me 3 hours to feel anything. Everybody's body is different with this plant.
100%. That's why, I give, kosher to all of the whole spectrum, because everybody works differently. Some people don't respond to this, or they don't like smoking. They would prefer an edible and things like that. Or some people would prefer this over that. So therefore, all across the board. So yeah, that's interesting. You're in Denver
No, I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, actually.
or Santa Fe, New Mexico. Okay, boy. Okay, I
Have
didn't know.
you been here?
I think I've driven through it.
Okay, well, you next time stop, and there's not no good Jewish deli here, so we're in trouble. But I can certainly put together some lox and bagel and cream cheese for you.
Just a lot of love. You got the love peace sign there behind you.
Well,
That's
my
all.
love name is Love, also, by the way.
You bet.
So,
You bet. Bet.
um,
Awesome.
so, where do you see the future of making cannabis kosher? I mean, do you see it getting large, getting big, or
When I was approached by a senior rabbi who asked me, like, what are you doing? What are you doing, like putting a kosher symbol on edibles, right? So I said, come on, in 10 years, it's going to be no different than a bottle of vodka, right? And he says, that is certainly the trend. And he did agree with me, okay? That eventually, it's going to be federally legal. It's going to be an herb. It's going to be no different than a bottle of vodka or tequila. And there are kosher symbols on vodka and tequila, which are more dangerous.
oh?
If you don't know, right?
With in mind that it will be federally legal eventually, and hopefully in the next couple of years or less, because we have an industry that's trying to thrive and they can't because of the tax situation and so forth. So, have you asked your rabbi friend if is it kosher for
Big cheap.
is it kosher for rabbis? Is it okay for rabbis to use this plant?
Medicinally, every rabbi will tell you for sure. Okay. Recreational, the Torah in general, we don't even have the concept of recreation in our vocabulary.
Right.
How do you like?
But are you of the understanding that people say that all use of cannabis is medicinal? Is that enough to say that it's all right? That there is
I'm more inclined to say that. Yes.
okay.
I'm
So
more inclined to say that. Okay. But of course, and like anything, things get abused, as we know. Okay. And certain people, it's not for. And I think you'll agree with me. Certain people, it's not for them, not for everybody. Okay. You might think it is for everybody. I think it's not for everybody. Okay.
can you give an example of who it may not be for?
I think a manic depressive, somebody who's a serious depressed person, a schizophrenia. I don't think for the schizophrenia should also.
Well, the
This was told to me by another doctor. Okay.
is
So
he a
I'm not
psychiatrist by any chance?
experienced. What?
Is he a psychiatrist, he or she?
Yes.
The psychiatric industry has been totally against cannabis for many, many years. I saw the board of psychiatric board here in New Mexico send someone to one of the meetings at the Department of Health saying that this is terrible. People should not be using this. But the whole thing, like we said earlier, is about dosage. Someone with anxiety can take the right dosage for them, and it can keep them out.
Save his life. Save his life.
But,
Save his life.
but if he takes too much, it could put him into an anxiety attack. So
Yes, and some people, listen, the experience I've had and the people I've spoken to, yeah, sometimes, if a person takes it and they get anxiety, so they got to deal with themselves. A lot of it is, if you have to get into the mind part, and do you love yourself? And if you don't, and you're not comfortable with yourself, so then, that's your journey, and that's each person's journey. But I like what you're saying. If you get the right dose, then you could initiate that journey for that person, and
Right.
that inner work for that person.
But-
So, like I say, it's, and certain people, listen, all I know is it helps a lot of people, and they should not be, it should not be withheld from them.
Mhm.
For all of those people with all of these other ailments. And I know a guy, yes, you're right. he had that anxiety part, or like an anger and edginess, right? And he took the right amount, and then he was a completely different person, and everything was cool. So it helps so many people in so many ways, right?
I'd like to tell you my experience with dealing with my elderly mom some years ago before she passed away. She was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, and of course that progresses into dementia, and then Alzheimer's. And like I started to say before, we have a medical cannabis program here, and she was in the program, so it was perfectly legal. I started her on like 1 milligram of a hard candy, okay, that had THC in it, and then I worked her up, and even the low dosage took the agitation off that you see with a lot of elderly people that just they're aggravated about everything. Okay,
Yes.
and it
Can't get comfortable with themselves in the world at all, right?
but it does work. We're going to see cannabis in the future as a Alzheimer's treatment and so forth, because as you probably know, because you're a cannabis expert in some ways, it creates neurogenesis, which is the rebuilding of brain cells.
That's important to know. I didn't know. This is the first time you're telling me that.
Yes,
Okay. I
neurogenesis.
know neurogenesis.
Yeah, I talked last week with Dr. Michelle Ross, and we talked about that for a few minutes on our show. And so, what's coming in the future with the medicinal value and what it's going to help with is just amazing. Because again, the government knows that it shrinks tumors, and they've people have suffered so terribly in the last 80 years, and they've done nothing about it. Because I mean, because Nixon blamed everything on marijuana and the Jews. Okay.
Oh, I didn't know it was the Jews.
Oh, yeah.
Always the Jews.
Yeah.
Always the.
It's always about the Jews. Okay. But,
Well, what did we do? What did I do?
no, you're not all the Jews, but, the Jewish people have just, they've helped so many people. It's just, they're
Yes,
got a stigma like cannabis has.
right. They do. Right. 100%. 100%. Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is the research is coming out, and I guess when it's federally legal, so then that'll be give more avenues for more research and more awareness for people, and
Absolutely.
it'll reach a lot of more people. Definitely, the stigma will be gone, which is a big thing, right? And because of all of the ideas that people think, oh, it's gateway, and all that kind of ideas. I'm telling you, I still meet people with all of that kind of stuff, and I think yes, only then will we really see more and more how this plant helps so many people in so many
I've
ways.
always responded to people who say that it's a gateway drug by saying, yes, it's actually a gateway out of harder drugs. And people have found great success, Rabbi, getting off of alcohol, opioids, all kinds of things. And there's actually, I believe, a place in a rehab in California and one in Colorado that actually use cannabis to with their patients to get them off of these harder drugs.
So I asked because I was confronted by some rabbis, like, "What are you doing?" I asked the big chief, the biggest chief in America, okay, biggest Jewish chief, okay, and I asked him about this. What's with the giving a kosher for medicinal? And he says, listen, exactly like what you're saying. He says, this thing helps a lot of people with very serious addictions. As opposed to the regular conventional medicine, I couldn't use his name, but he says, there's no reason why you cannot make it kosher according to the Torah. So that would basically gave me my green light to go ahead and do it. So it does help a lot of people, and even in opinions. But like I say, until it's federally legal, there's still all of this apprehension that's going on, right? That people are still holding back, but it's getting there. I know another rabbi who had terrible pain, big rabbi, in Chicago, and they finally gave it to him, and it turned his life around. But he can't come out with it. He can't come out with it because it's like he'll be ostracized by the rest of the community, right?
Well, hopefully that will change in our lifetime. It has
God willing.
a lot in our lifetime so far, And it's just been a crazy 53 years of my life, using the plant, when I was younger, and, having to buy it under terrible circumstances and so forth. But look where we are today. It's amazing if you walk into a dispensary and you see all these products and for medicine, you've got patches and you've got suppositories and tinctures and oil and capsules. It's really amazing where we got to, in 2021 right now. And who knows? There's studies going on saying that it could even help treat COVID in some ways. There's people doing studies in
I
the.
heard that too. Heard that too.
So, anything else you'd like to touch on before we go? You got
No. That's it. That's
anything
it.
to promote? Just see you Saturday in shul. Anything?
Yeah, you'll see. You got a shul you go to there in New Mexico. I'll see you Saturday in shul.
There's plenty of them here for
All
sure.
you Yidden out there, come to shul on Shabbos, right?
Thank you, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. I really appreciate it today. Do you have,
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
you have any books or anything?
You. What?
You have any books or anything to promote?
No books. No books yet. I'm still working on my first book
Okay.
coming out. It's called Creating Angels.
Oh,
God thoughts create our reality from the Torah perspective.
I'm working on my first book too, and when I finish it, I'm going to read another one. Thank you, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen.
Pleasure, Larry.
We'll be right.
Okay, Larry Love.
We'll be right back after this.
All right.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love.
Well, I want to thank Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. That was an amazing interview. Lots of great information. I also want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be on the show, write us at info@MMJRadio.com. Join me on Clubhouse every Friday and Saturday nights at midnight East Coast and 9 p.m. on the West Coast for Late Night with Larawana. And we'll be right back next week with another great guest.